Chili. So, I don't know if you know that about me, but I turned vegetarian, like I turned into a werewolf. No, I became vegetarian in 2014. So, like, my New Year's resolution for 2014 was to not eat meat anymore. And since then, it never even crossed my mind that I could eat meat. So I became a vegetarian sort of like the 1st of January 2014, and now for 2016 my New Year's resolution was to become vegan, which is like the easiest thing ever for me because I slowly cut out like dairy and eggs and all the other stuff anyway, and I'm not ever wearing leather things or whatever, so that's actually not what this video is about. Okay, but starting, yeah, Kitty, he's just kind of going crazy. Starting with that transition, he's hilarious. So when you kind of become aware of what the normal European or normal American diet is about, sorry, I'm very distracted. Can you chill? Do you want to chill? No, he doesn't want to chill. So when I became aware of what's wrong with our eating habits and how easy it is to actually change it, I wanted to educate myself a little bit more, and I started reading non-fiction books about food. And I thought that I could tell you about the 4 non-fiction food-related books that I've read and kind of review them, kind of compare them, and kind of tell you what I took out of each one and who I think would benefit from them. So the first book that I want to talk about is probably the most popular one as well, and that's Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, and he is the author of Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. So he's kind of popular for that. So Eating Animals is based on the premise that Jonathan Safran Foer they had a baby, and he wants to educate himself, and he's asking himself the question on if he should feed his kid meat or not, or how he should feed his kid. It's not, in the beginning he says it's not really about vegetarianism or veganism or anything. He just wants to know what the healthiest thing is for his kid, for the environment, for the family. I think that Eating Animals is a fantastic book, and I think that everybody should read it, but it's especially good for beginners who don't really know a lot about what we eat and what, meat-based diet does to our environment or to the animals or to our bodies. So I think it's good for beginners who just kind of want to dip into like the food-related non-fiction kind of world, because Jonathan Safran Foer he's a writer. Like, he's not kind of like a journalist or a scholar. Like, he's an author. So the way that he expresses those or the way he asks those questions and expresses his opinions and everything is very, like, literary. So it kind of reads like a book of fiction, but it actually is nonfiction. But he tells stories, and he packages this big topic and the questions and what he finds out in his studies in such a nice and understandable way that it's still very, like, enjoyable. Like, you read it and you're not reading a textbook, but you're reading a novel that happens to be true. Also, if you've read any other book by Jonathan Safran Foer, then you know that he kind of plays with imagery, and he plays with different formats of writing books and kind of like pictures in his books as well. Like, especially in Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, there were pages where he just wrote and wrote and wrote, and then the distance between the lines, what's that called again? I don't know the word. But it got closer, and then in the end it's just black pages and stuff like that. So he kind of plays with that as well in Eating Animals, because so he kind of makes statistics and facts kind of relatable, or you kind of see it, because, for example, one of the title pages of a new chapters is a square or a rectangle, whatever, and then in the little corner it says this is how much space a chicken has in a normal cage factory farm egg farm. So you kind of see this little square in front of you, and you know kind of how big a chicken is, and you're like, well, this will never fit, like, that's not even possible. And then on another page he just wrote, I can't really remember, and I wish I could show you, but my book is in Germany. So he plays with the amount of words and the amount of letters, and then the amount of words that's on one page corresponds to a statistic. So he says, so how many times I've said cow in this page represents, you know, how much meat we eat, or a normal person eats in a year, or something like that. Another thing that I remember that I loved about the book is that he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He doesn't go out and, like, explain every gory detail of factory farming or something, or slaughterhouses. But he, for example, talks about bycatch, and instead of saying, you know, there's 100 species that are affected and that are killed as bycatch, for example, this shark, this dolphin, blah, 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 and then etc., he actually names every single species that is known to be killed as bycatch. So there's like 1 or 2 pages, just animals that are killed while fishing other fish. If you haven't noticed from all my ramble about this book, I love it, and I think that everybody in the world should read it just to kind of educate themselves a little bit on what they eat and what it does to the world and us and whatever. So I think that's the best food-related book that anyone could ever pick up, and it's my favorite. Then the next book that I've read, actually I just recently read it, but I want to talk about it next, is The Face on Your Plate by Jeffrey Moussaieff Masson. I probably slaughtered his name, I'm sorry. But it's about the truth about food. That's what it says in the title. And I got this for free, just randomly from my mom-in-law. And when I started reading it, I kind of thought that all the information is probably sort of old for me. But then as I kept reading, it was really, really interesting. It was very scientific, very well researched. What I love most about this book is that it's so well structured, and that the chapters are so well focused on one topic, that the book gives a very good overview of a lot of problems and a lot of aspects of what we eat and what veganism and all is about. So I think that's why it's great for a beginner. Beginner, you know what I mean, like someone who just is starting to educate themselves on food-related things. So just to kind of give you an idea, the first chapter is only about the environmental problems that factory farming and meat eating and stuff causes. The second chapter is only about what animals feel and how they're treated in factory farming and farms and slaughterhouses and all of that, and how like the moral questions kind of come into that. And then the third chapter is only about aquaculture and how fish are farmed. So the first chapter is about the Nile and the ignorance involved in, you know, eating meat and killing for food, even though we're always taught compassion, stuff like that. And then the fifth chapter is kind of his personal journey, and it's called A Day in the Life of a Vegan. So that's more about what he eats, where he goes to restaurants, family reunions, how he kind of fits the whole veganism into his lifestyle and his life. And it's that one's very, very interesting. So then the next 2 books that I'm going to talk about are more food and health related, other than veganism or vegetarianism. Like there's tips and tricks and recipes and everything that involve meat that I just kind of ignore. So the next book I want to talk about is called Hungry for Change, and it is the book to a documentary that's also on Netflix by, I'm going to so mess up his name, James Colquhoun and Laurentine Bosch. And Mark Hyman, that's what it says in the credits. So these people made a book that kind of explains a lot of things that the documentary also talks about, but it's also a recipe book. So half of the book is the science behind what's wrong with our food and the American diet and how we can change it. And then the second part is juices, recipes, smoothies, teas and hot drinks, breakfast, soups and stews, salads and dressings, vegetable dishes, fish, seafood and meat, snacks and desserts, and like there's a lot of things. There's a detox guide in there, so a lot of very good recipes, and it's all healthy and whole foods and stuff like that. But then the first part kind of explores, again, like I said, things that the documentary also touched on. So the chapters are called How Did We Get Here, The Diet Trap, You Are What You Eat, You Are What You Drink, You Are What You Think, Eating for Beauty, and Detox, Accelerating the Change. So that's also a very good overview, and you also get kind of the practical approach where you, after reading this, can actually change your life by just trying the recipes and stuff like that. So I think that's very good for people that just want to make a change like right away, and not also buy a recipe book or research vegan recipes or good recipes that, you know, have whole foods in it instead of Kraft Dinner. So that book is very, very good too. And Hungry for Change is actually also the newest book out of the 4 that I'm going to talk about, because Hungry for Change was written in 2012. I believe that's also the year that the documentary came out. And then the other 3 books came out in 2009, which is now 7 years ago. So it might have some kind of old statistics and maybe things that have changed until now. But, you know, as an overview and as a kind of point to start, it's pretty good. And then the last book that I wanted to mention is called Deep Nutrition: Why Your Genes Need Traditional Food by Catherine Shanahan, MD. So she's a doctor, and it is pretty much a textbook. So it's super, super, very scientific, very in detail. She doesn't ever say anything that she doesn't prove 10 times afterwards with like 15 studies and pictures and graphs, and like it's super, super detailed. It's very, very interesting, but it's very dense. So if you want to kind of go very deep and go into like the molecular and genetic and whatever level, this is a very good book. It took me forever to get through it, but it was really interesting to me, but it was kind of dense. Obviously, because it's sort of like a textbook, like it's something that if you study nutrition you would read. But I kind of just wanted to go a little bit into the scientific part of it, like the biology and biochemistry and stuff, instead of just always reading about, yay, salad's good and meat's not, kind of thing. So she came up with the 4 pillars of world cuisine. So those are foods that program your body for beauty, brains, and health. And I think it's like vegetables, whole grains, meat on the bone, and then like the nasty bits like liver and brain and whatever. She kind of just wants, or like she wants to recommend using whole foods and actual, you know, unprocessed and whatever foods. This book also explores symmetry and what we think as like what we consider beautiful, and how that has to do with what we eat and genetics and everything. And then she also gives sort of a guide to when you're pregnant and what you're supposed to eat to make a healthy, beautiful, intelligent child. So it's about that too. Alrighty, I'm going to link all of the books that I've mentioned in the information box down there. And I hope that it was kind of interesting. I hope that I didn't blabber on too much about, you know, not important things, and I could kind of give you an overview of what I read that's food related, and maybe give you kind of a point to start as well. And if you have any recommendations for me, I'm always kind of looking for more nonfiction books, and that's one of my resolutions for this year, that I want to read more nonfiction. And yeah, I would be really interested in that. And other than that, I will see you very soon. Bye.